So your 2-year-old wants to ride her trike in the street. Please don't ride your trike in the street. Why? Because it's dangerous. Why? Don't feed the baby toothpaste. Why? Because it's not food. Why? Don't draw on the wall. Why? Because I said so. Sometimes the answer is just that, because I said so, at least when we're dealing with the Almighty God. The story of Esther shows God's sovereignty and his providence. God has ordained this very moment of my life for his good purpose. What is God calling me to do at this time and in this very place in my life? How will I answer him? Every day, big or small, we will always have a choice or a challenge before us. Whether it's what action I'll take next, or how will I respond to the person who just cut me off in traffic. It's always our choice. What we choose determines who we will glorify. I'm always telling the kids, who do you want to make happy, God or Satan? In a fallen world, we will always have struggles. John 16:33 tells us, here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows. Right now, we're still going through a once-in-a-lifetime COVID pandemic. No one living has ever experienced anything like this before. All the normal trials are still with us. Plus, we have COVID on top. We may have experienced illness, loss of income, or maybe our job disappeared altogether. Life was a strange world of no paper goods or disinfectant to be had. Our shelves are no longer stocked with anything and everything we could want when we want it. Plus, you can't even get to them because I'm going the wrong way. The COVID pandemic didn't stop life's other burdens either. We still had other health issues, surgeries that needed to be scheduled, cancer and chemo, dialysis, wayward children, and divorces, all exacerbated with the restrictions we are now living under because of COVID. There was growing division in our country and even between friends and families. For some, fear and anxiety of getting sick was the biggest problem. For me, it was separation from my family. I hated that part. Life as we knew it became a thing of the past. Who knew that face masks would become a new fashion statement? I certainly didn't think I would make over 200 masks and still be making them 8 months later. So the question is, why am I here? Why am I in this situation? Why is a question we often ask, but asking why can go two ways. We can ask why from the perspective of, woe is me, why am I in this situation? Or we can ask why God has allowed me to be here at this time in this situation. I look at all the things that had to fall into place in the story of Esther. Mordecai adopts Esther. Vashti rebels against the king. The king searches for a new queen. Esther has the favor of the eunuch. Mordecai overhears the plot on the king. The king can't sleep. He reads the history. He happens to read the part about Mordecai, etc. And finally, he raises the scepter to Esther. My biggest challenge was my divorce, losing everything I knew and starting over. Most of all, I lost the idol I had made. Romans 8:28 was my verse, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Because I had seen in the past how God had worked in my life, I held on to that verse. And I waited, trusting that God had a plan and a purpose, and his will would eventually come about. My new favorite verses became Jeremiah 29:11-14. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back from captivity. I look at how God has used me and how, if I was still in that marriage, they wouldn't have come about. I became a pastoral counselor. I began mentoring my dear neighbor. My work with the kids in the school. I possibly wouldn't have found Oak Point in this ministry. And most important, not becoming Grammy of the Bible to my granddaughter across the street. God had a plan. He had a plan for my life. It was a good plan, but it didn't always look good. I had to trust him. I had to think, why does he have me here at this time? And what am I going to choose to do? So that is the question. What will I do? What will you do? We can turn our trials into our testimony. Esther certainly did. Mordecai told her if she chose to do nothing, deliverance would come from some other place. But she should consider, perhaps she was in this place at this time for this very reason. Esther decided to stand up for God's people. And if she died, she died. Esther's story reminds me of Dr. Martin Luther King. As you know, Dr. King was an American minister and activist in the 60s. I believe Dr. King heard God call him for that time, in that place, for that specific reason. Dr. King answered that call, even to giving up his own life to save his people. We have many stories in the Bible that show God's providence. The story of Joseph is a favorite of mine. Joseph told his dreams to his brothers and made them jealous. The jealous brothers threw them in a well. Then they decided to sell him into slavery. He was taken to Egypt and he became Potiphar's slave and then was thrown into the prison where, through God, he interpreted dreams. Later, when one of the inmates is released, he hears Pharaoh has a dream. He remembers that Joseph interpreted his dream. So Joseph is called to interpret Potiphar's dream. Joseph says he cannot interpret dreams, but God can. And he tells the Pharaoh what his dream meant. Joseph ends up Pharaoh's right-hand man and saves Egypt and his family from famine. Joseph saw the providence of God, and he forgave his brothers and told them, though you meant it for evil, God intended it for good. What is it you're facing in your story today? Who are the people your choices will affect? What will you decide? God has arranged for every moment in your life and mine. Nothing you're going through is a surprise to him. You are here for such a time as this. Choose this day whom you will serve, but as for me, I will serve the Lord.